So what's it like driving one of these big old beasts? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome to 54 Nights RV. I know researching motorhomes, other than price, one of the big concerns was, can I drive this big old monster? You know, and you do a lot of research, you watch a lot of YouTube videos, and they talk about putting whiteout or tape on certain spots on the windshield or your rearview mirror to help you identify where to spot your coach, when to start making a turn, and etc. Even one of them has all these measurements you take off the center of the rear wheel, and you put a sticker on the side of the coach so your spotter can help you determine when you turn to back into a campsite. And all of them are great ideas. I mean, it's anything to help you out driving these things. I didn't use any of them, but they're good tools if you need them. You know, the day we bought this coach, we got to take it home at rush hour. I had never driven something this big. Miss Terry was my spotter and my blocker. I used her to help me. If I needed to change lanes, she would scoot over and give me an empty spot to pull into. But that was probably the longest drive I've taken in this beast, and it was short in miles. But by the time we got home, I honestly expected to see fingerprint indentions on the steering wheel, permanently there, forever. Hi, Terry.
Hi.
We're just leaving Lake Murray State Park, and she's getting the dogs all buckled in. You know, it's kind of a public service message, I suppose. She works in dog rescue and has been for over 20 years, and cats and gerbils and possums and hawks and
a little bit, mostly dogs.
But she sees a lot of stories of RVers in accidents, and you know, you'd probably safely say most RVers have pets, but RVers in accidents that lose their dogs or cats because when they wreck, the animal freaks and bolts. So just a good practice to get into is find a way to secure your animal in the vehicle, not just RV, but even in your car. You know, finagle a leash around a seatbelt or something.
And a harness, not a collar.
Yeah, and that way, if you get into an accident, they don't go running off, and then you spend, you know, the next several weeks fretting about, you know, your dog.
Weeks? You'd be fine. Months, years, if you don't, forever.
Well, thank you for that uplifting conversation. Anyway, back to driving this thing. About a week after we bought it, I picked out a route, and it was about 100 miles. It was just going to be a shakedown cruise of sorts. 40 or 50 miles out west on a 2-lane blacktop, and another, you know, back on the interstate, just to try to get my legs underneath me and learn how to drive this thing. That 2-lane highway that we went down wasn't much wider than this road right here. I mean, it had to be because it was a highway, but it didn't feel like it was much wider than this. And it was springtime in Oklahoma. The wind blows in Oklahoma year round. Every now and then we get a calm day, but especially you're talking spring, those winds will kick up at a pretty good clip. I want to say that day they were gusting around 30 mile an hour, which when you're driving a 13-foot tall Velveeta box makes for an adventurous journey. But we headed out, and I couldn't take both hands off the wheel. I couldn't take one hand off the wheel. And every time a semi-truck would come from the other direction, he'd bring that storm front with him, and just that coach is just wanting to go off in the ditch. Fighting it the whole way. My hands were sore from gripping the steering wheel so tight because I was so nervous about it. I'm watching both rear view mirrors or side view mirrors because the feeling you get when you're in this is one of the things you really don't consider. You consider the height and the length. You don't often consider the width of this RV. And looking in the side view mirrors, it looks like you've got about 6 inches of clearance on either side. Not a whole lot to play with. So, you're watching both mirrors back and forth like you're hiding out in the breezeway smoking a cigarette and trying not to get caught by the teacher. All that, it was a nerve-wracking experience. And then on the way back on the interstate, felt like I had a little bit wider leeway. Apparently I wasn't doing real good because people passing me were almost cutting off over into the shoulder to get around me. That wind was hitting me from the passenger side and trying to blow me into the other lane. By the time I got home, I felt a little bit better. Still couldn't take both hands off the wheel. I was thirsty because I couldn't take a drink that whole time. But I did feel a little bit better about the coach. And it's a trite, thing you see people say all the time. You get used to it. Honestly, you really do. You start to get used to it. It's like a new car, the Dodge pickup where you can't see the front corners of it. After a while of driving it, you get a feeling of where those front corners are. After a while of driving this RV, you get a feel for the coach. You get a feel about where your tail end is, where it's going to swing out when you make a turn. You get a feel for where you are in relationship to the lane. Whether you get comfortable with it or not is a different story. I'm comfortable with it. We've put 7,000 miles on this thing since March. I'm comfortable with it. Some people don't ever get comfortable with it.
Some people won't try.
Yeah. There are people that just okay, I'm done. Trade this in on a.
No, I mean me. I won't try it. I let you drive.
Oh yeah,
but
well,
that too.
she won't drive.
Yeah.
She drove it for like 3 feet the other day at Lake McMurtry.
Yeah.
Rolled it forward for me, so.
I'm kind of proud of that.
She didn't wreck it.
Overcoming my fear.
But yeah, the comfort level is kind of up to you. It's an individual thing. As tried as it sounds, you do actually get used to it. It was intimidating when I was looking into it, doing the research, and probably even more so on that first road trip home. Just take it out like we did that one blustery day. We weren't going anywhere. We were just taking it for a drive so I could learn how to drive it.
I think some RV places also have a deal where you can learn to drive, right? Haven't you seen that?
I have seen that. I don't know that any of our local dealerships do that. Some of them, you know, throw you the keys and tell you to have at it on your way home after you've signed the deal. But there are places that, you know, you don't have to research it a bit, but there are places that will help you learn how to drive these things. You know, you hear. Hey guys, I gotta interrupt this video for a minute. I'm getting ready to start talking about how the RV isn't that loud, and you know, I'm editing this video and I realize, well, you can't hardly hear me because there's noise going on. Wait a minute, I didn't hear that when I was in the RV. Well, it's this little thing. Had the phone mounted on here and this mounted to the window on the side, and that road from Lake Murray out to the interstate, and even getting on the interstate and part of I-35 is kind of bumpy. So this thing is just sitting there bouncing up and down, and is wiggling the jack for the mic. I picked a poor spot to put the lapel mic to start with, but anyway, long story short, it's all this. It's not the noise in the RV. Yeah, I'm a YouTube noob. If anybody knows something better than this for mounting to film, leave it down in the comments. This thing might work good for a GPS or something, but it ain't worth a darn for recording video. Anyway, we'll get back to the story. One of the things you see on the forums all the time is a comparison between the F-53 chassis, which is, you know, the most Class A gas RVs use the Ford F-53 chassis, and a diesel chassis. You'll hear that diesels are easier to drive. I don't know. I've never driven a diesel rig. If they're easier to drive, hey, cool. But it's almost inferred that the gas chassis is extremely difficult to drive. It's not. It's got quirks that you got to get used to, but it's not all that difficult to drive. The other thing you hear is, you know, diesels are so quiet and gas coaches are just unbearably loud. Not so much. You know, you got the motor right here underneath you at the doghouse, and you hear that when you're cranking to get up a hill or getting up to speed on an on-ramp. To me, it's a lot like a full-size van. You know, we pulled a trailer for years using a full-size Chevy van, and the motor sitting right under the doghouse is loud. Does this train make you dizzy?
It's making me dizzy.
It's making me dizzy. But this thing isn't. My point is, this thing isn't really any louder than the motor side of it isn't any louder than a full-size van. As far as the squeaking and the crashes and all this stuff you hear nightmare stories about, you know, there needs to be a warning label on the door that says, you know, contents may settle. You know, for the first little bit you're out on the road, things are going to be shifting into place. But for the most part, it's really not that loud. I mean, there are some noises and some rattles and squeaks, but when you consider what you're driving, it's there's nothing surprising about it. And you know, Terry and I can carry a normal conversation. At least I think she can hear me. I can always hear her because she's yelling at me most of the time. But you know, it's really not. It's not unbearably loud. So don't let that steer you away from getting a motorhome. If you know, because there's a healthy price difference between a gas and a diesel motorhome. And if that diesel price is going to make you decide that you're just going to go get you a little bumper pull, you know, don't let that do that. These gas coaches are good coaches. They really are. And one of the other anxieties that you have about driving something this large, of course, getting in and out of campgrounds. Well, you just saw us get out of one campground. There are some tight campgrounds. As a matter of fact, several years ago, when I made a reservation at Manatee Springs State Park down in Florida, we had a pop-up, and the lady was like, she called me after I made the reservation, and she wanted to make sure that I was confident in my ability to back that thing up into a hole. The spot that I got, I'm not real sure I could get this motorhome into it. But, you know, I got the pop-up in it, but when I got there, you could see why she was concerned. That the drive, the campground road, the loop road itself was not much wider than the vehicle. And then the entry into the campsite, which was a beautiful campsite, was about that wide too. So it took some maneuvering to get it in there. So there are going to be places you can't get in a Class A, but for the most part, it's no big deal. Anxiety, another anxiety is gas stations. You know, if you've towed a camper for any length of time, you know, you get to this habit of when you get to a gas station, you not only look to see about getting into the place, but you look for how you're going to get out. And that's a pretty big concern with the motorhome, especially if you've got a tow vehicle behind you, because you can't back up with the tow. One of the things that I do, another, you know, Flying J, if there's a Flying J in the area with an RV island, it's a given. That's where I'm going to end up going. But, you know, when you get up in the morning and get ready to hit the road, you have a pretty good idea about how far you can drive before you need gas. So jump on Google Maps, find a gas station in that range, and go to satellite view and take a look at it. See if you feel comfortable getting in and out of that gas station. Even take it to Street View and take a look at it. You know, just keep hunting and pecking until you find that one that you're going to be comfortable with. That way you're not running on fumes, cruising through a small town trying to find a gas station that you can get in and out of. I have made a couple of improvements to the chassis. First improvement was what they call the cheap handling fix, CHF. If you Google it, you can find all sorts of information on it. RVers have been doing it for years, and it works. And it works awesome. it's a very simple fix that doesn't cost you a dime. When Ford makes these chassis, they send them off to the manufacturer. The anti-sway bar is connected to the brackets at basically its weakest point. It's got two mounting locations on the bar, and it's basically mounted at its loosest. Well, when you throw all this weight on top of this chassis, you know, with the house on top and everything that goes in it, that's not a good spot for that anti-sway bar to be mounted at. So what you do, you move those bolts, you move that mounting location, and the chassis gets tighter. The rolling, when you make turns, you know, when you first drive this thing off, when you make a turn, it feels like this thing's just going to end up on its side and you're going to be climbing out this window. But you change that mounting location on that sway bar and it doesn't roll as much. It still rolls. I mean, this thing's huge, but it doesn't roll as much. And when you're going down the highway, the wind doesn't kick it quite as much. The passing semi-trucks don't toss you quite as bad. And it really makes a world of difference. It's a really big difference. Second thing I did was I put the steering control, I think it's safety steer. It's a big giant shock absorber, and what it helps is it helps steering maintain centered. So, you know, I'm driving down the interstate with one hand right now, and it's a blustery day. That was another big help. Probably not as big as the cheap handling fix, but it was still a big help. The third thing I got to do that I haven't done yet is a track bar. It goes from the pumpkin to the frame on the rear end, and it's supposed to help a little bit with the wag of the tail. She tells me it's nauseating trying to sleep in bed back there when I'm going down the highway. She blames my driving, but I think it might be I need that track bar. So, anywho, I hope this helps y'all out a little bit in your decision to buy a coach. Maybe alleviate some of your anxieties about driving something this big. But I guess, you know, as tried as it sounds, you do get used to it. I'm comfortable with it. You may get comfortable, you may not, but you do get used to it. It takes a few miles and you finally get it down. So anyway, I'm gonna teach her how to drive this thing. I'll catch you guys later.